Harley Hatfield always said, with a little human regulation, that the trail could be preserved for future generations. We hope that we attract the right type of people that cherish the trail as much as we do.
These trails really have to be respected and taken care of.
It's the important link between the interior posts and the depot at Fort Langley to get the furs to where the markets are.
It was steep. It had to be hacked out of the mountainside.
One wrong foot placement and you're tumbling down the whole ridge.
Here we are, and it might be we were the first people since 1860 to have come back up to this trail and used the blazes on these trails to be able to find our way through to Hope.
It's been said the best hike is the one you're on. This is one of those hikes. The Hudson's Bay Company Heritage Trail is a 74-kilometer wilderness hiking route. The HBC Trail takes you from the coastal forest just east of Hope, British Columbia, up and over the North Cascades into the drier interior climate of the Tulameen Plateau. The elevation gain is considerable, especially on the first 2 days as you work your way east toward Mount Davis. Since 2009, the Hope Mountain Center has worked with many people and groups to restore the trail. I first heard about the HBC Trail from resource management specialist Kelly Cook. Kelly has a passion for historic trails of the Cascades and has played a leading role in restoring the HBC Trail.
So if you see only one-sided blazes, sometimes it can still be an old trail, but they're keeping it a secret.
In 2015, intrigued by Kelly's stories, I explored a portion of the trail with my wife Erin Trainer and my mother-in-law Mary Trainer. We hiked a scenic stretch from Jacobson Lake to Palmer's Pond. The experience left me wanting more, and I was inspired to hike the full route the following summer. After that hike, I immediately forgot about my heavy backpack, blistered feet, and bruised shoulders. I was ready to go again. This time, I'd bring camera gear and share the story of the trail through film and celebrate Canada 150. Erin couldn't join me, which leads to our new hiking partner, Woods. Hopefully he'll be on the trail within a few years. In 2017, I recruited Brandyn Steele, a scout leader and avid outdoorsman. Brandyn was 19 at the time and had never been on a hike this long or this difficult.
It seems kind of daunting at the beginning of the trailhead. 74 kilometers, 5 days. It's going to be quite the task, but I'm excited for it.
Grant Stevely, a professional distiller who had a previous career as an outdoor guide, rounded out our team.
Well, we're only here with the camera once. Or twice.
The HBC Trail was completed in 1849 with the help of local First Nations. It was built to link the Fraser River at Fort Hope with Fort Kamloops and other important fur forts farther north. The HBC Trail played an important role in the history and development of British Columbia, but it was originally a First Nations route for hunting and trade, and that's where our story begins.
Many of our trails lead to very sacred areas. Even though they call it Hudson Bay Trails now, it was not Hudson Bay Trails. It was whoever's nation they went through was their trails.
Before the Europeans got here, there was extensive trade routes established by the First Nations people, because that's how we survived, is by working together.
And it's consistent with what happened on the HBC. You know, that was a collaboration between European fur traders and Hawaiians and French Canadians and First Nations people, and the origins of our country are really based on that cooperation, and I think that's the spirit of reconciliation we need to return to, is the era of the fur trade when our mutual economies benefited from our interactions together.
coffee kit right there. The Deluxe edition, I have the double shot.
Not dead yet.
Day one was brutal. I was not expecting it to be that difficult. It was something that I completely underestimated, and I could see why it was named one of the most treacherous parts of this trail.
In 46, when the boundary is established at the 49th parallel as the border between USA and what is now Canada, that changed everything. If they didn't find an all-British route, they were not going to keep paying duties, and they're withdrawing their business back over across the Rockies, and that's it. So the British influence would have been gone, and we would have probably been American territory now.
They didn't know that there were other potential passes that were lower. Not a very good route, and one that would only last about 11 years because of topography and weather.
Yeah, I often think about that, what the life of the fur brigadiers would have been like. Nasty, brutish, and short comes to mind. You know, the average lifespan of an HBC employee was 45 years. They had to do that entire trip from Fort Kamloops to Fort Hope and on to Fort Langley in raw wilderness, and there was no safety net. It must have been stressful. I sometimes don't want to overly romanticize those lives because I think they lived at great risk, at great physical peril.
It would have been very uncomfortable traveling for part, but it would also have been quite beautiful because there are mountain peaks and lovely forest lands as well.
What are your expectations of this trip?
Other than being a porter for a camera crew? Well, for me, I think it was just seeing the historical significance of the trail and relating to what we're doing with the most up-to-date gear, light equipment. My experience being from the Rockies, I didn't expect to be so much below tree line, and certainly there's a different ecosystem here, the flora and fauna. I certainly didn't expect this.
Mr. Hatfield saw this unique historic trail of commerce into British Columbia was undiscovered. And so he started to research in the archives in London, in Winnipeg, and Victoria, and found all of these beautiful, intriguing maps and diaries of some of the early people that had gone over this trail. I realized the historical significance that the film might bring some 10 or 15 years later, and here we are almost 40 years later, and it's a very useful film to be able to see what it was like during that rediscovery. It was the first time anybody had been over the trail from end to end, so to speak. Part of the issue in relocating those trails was a major fire that came through about 1922. We were able to take axes and do a nice clean cut above that old Hudson's Bay mark and count the number of rings from 1922 backwards. And those rings stopped at 1849, so we knew we were on the trail.
The views have been absolutely incredible. It's really cool as we're going along. You're changing different environments and ecosystems as the pressure changes and the altitude changes. Some camps have signs explaining the history of why they're there and who named them what they are and what their historical significance is. It's pretty incredible the work they've done.
When you were talking on the trail, you were using that radio voice. I used to be the voice of the Sunshine Village powder phone. Good morning, Calgary skiers and boarders, and thank you for calling Sunshine Village's powder phone, your 24-hour information line that'll be updated daily. Is this my good side?
The 4x4 trails in and around Lodestone Lake and down towards Wells Lake, they probably go back to the early mineral exploration and the early hunters. I mean, we've already demonstrated what 400 horses can do and how 125 years later, the scar that was just left by cattle and horses, let alone ATVs and four-wheel drives. It was disappointing the very first time I ever went up there in 1971, but it was at least nice to be able to get off that, and then you really had a sense that you were just back 125 years.
I think it's really important that we give credit to the last generation who protected this trail, found it, located it, and then petitioned the government for 40 years for its protection.
When we have a planned crossing, we work closely with an archaeologist. In this case, Brenda Gould with the Upper Similkameen Indian Band is one of our key individuals on the assessment side. We also work with the Ministry of Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations on the recreational side so that we have the required legal permits to cross it, as it is, this trail is protected by the Heritage Conservation Act, but also there may be small elements like a horse getting up and down off of a road crossing to make sure that that crossing meets all those elements for today and for the future.
One can just hope that the trail can be rehabilitated by proper tree planting on both sides to be able to bring back that sense of being out there.
It's a very sensitive ecosystem up here. You're supposed to stay on all the trails that are maintained. They don't really want you tromping through the rest of the woods.
If people can continue to use that same philosophy and just pack everything out that you pack in, they learn some history through the soles of their feet, like Mr. Harley Hatfield would love, because he did a lot of work to preserve it for us, so we would like it preserved for future generations.
Little kick-ass. Action.
Okanagan Historical Society and the Okanagan Similkameen Park Society were very instrumental to be able to work with all sorts of community groups, such as the naturalist clubs of the interior and the naturalist clubs of British Columbia and smaller branch groups in the lower mainland, to be able to establish this particular trail because of its historical significance. So I think that was very important, and that's why I was so glad that in later years the Hope Mountain Center came on stream, and it's really nice to see the trails up and active again. Because once you've done the Hudson's Bay Fur Brigade Trail, I think you can really call yourselves a true wilderness backpacker.